Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire fans have now entered mass hysteria after George R.R. Martin shared his thoughts about the fans' backlash regarding his status updates on his Not-A-Blog website. As you can imagine, it has sent shockwaves throughout the Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire fandom. The author's fans have been incredibly upset, and many would say rightfully so, now that they have waited for over 14 years for The Winds of Winter, the upcoming novel in his A Song of Ice and Fire saga. The fandom has been divided after he released that emotional update regarding everything the fans have said about him over the last decade. Now, before I go any further, I want to read what he actually said because some of you might not be aware of what happened. In the early morning hours of May 28th, George R.R. Martin went onto his Not-A-Blog website where he would share some information about the release of his late friend's upcoming film. And as he was sharing that information, he suddenly ranted about how the fans might react to that update. He said, I know. Some of you will be pissed off by this as you are by everything I announce here that is not about Westeros or the Winds of Winter. You have given up on me or on the book. I will never finish Winds, and if I do, I will never finish A Dream of Spring. If I do, it won't be any good. I ought to get some other writer to hit for me. I'm gonna die soon anyway because I'm so old. I lost all interest in A Song of Ice and Fire decades ago. I don't give a shit about writing any longer. I only sit around and spend my money. I also edit the wildcard books too, but you hate the wildcards. You don't care about anything but the Winds of Winter. You've told me so often enough. The thing is, I do care about them, and I care about Westeros and Winds as well. The Starks and the Lannisters and Targaryens, Tyrion and Asha, Dany and Daenerys, the dragons and the direwolves, I care about them all. More than you can ever imagine. This is basically what the fans have said to him over the last decade whenever he announces something that isn't set in the A Song of Ice and Fire universe, or more specifically, the Winds of Winter. It's no secret, we have all been anxiously awaiting for the release of the upcoming novel in his A Song of Ice and Fire saga. We have waited, and waited, and waited. The thing is, George R.R. Martin is right about what he said. Those are some of the reactions he would have seen if he did not say them on his own. And let's be honest, a lot of fans will say those things even when he makes an announcement about one of his friends dying. I've seen it with my own eyes all over his social media ever since Game of Thrones ended and The Winds of Winter wasn't here. I would never go that far myself, but I've certainly made my own videos where I've said I don't believe he will finish the next novel. While he still might care about A Song of Ice and Fire, it does seem like his interest has shifted. He always seems to find something else to work on, even after he said that would not happen until he released The Winds of Winter. Obviously, I'll never fully understand how incredibly difficult it must be to write something like this, but I just wish he would be more open about why he's still not able to get it done after nearly a decade and a half of writing. I honestly would just like to have a status update every once in a while about where he's at in the novel, instead of him just simply saying, yes, I'm still writing. We all know that already. He wants all of us to be excited and interested about all of his other writing, yet he doesn't show that same enthusiasm about the one thing that brought us all here. In fact, the thought itself seems to bring him a great amount of misery. It's written all over his face whenever someone mentions it during an interview. What I have found interesting about that update is how some of his fans and creators have started to backpedal after seeing what he said. While some have certainly doubled down, I've seen some fans and creators now act like they have never said a negative thing about him. It's not against the law to be upset about something that we all love so much. But I also understand why George might be upset when so many fans are saying he better release the novel before he dies, or how he should stop wasting time talking about his late friend's work when he could be writing instead. There are so many other ways they could ask him to get back to work without it sounding so incredibly disrespectful. Another thing I've found interesting about all this is how it has led to everyone sharing their thoughts about why we still don't have the novel. As most of you know already, we have heard 1,000 different reasons why he hasn't been able to finish his A Song of Ice and Fire saga. Well, I recently read an article about an alleged inside source who says they know the real reason why it wasn't released years ago. Now, I have no way of confirming any of this information, but I thought it was fascinating nonetheless. According to the article, an industry insider said the 13 years late novel was actually finished all the way back in 2016 during the filming of Season 6 of A Game of Thrones. The insider, who we confirmed worked in the publishing industry at big companies, said that they have spoken with the editors at both Spectra and Voyager, who are George R.R. Martin's publishers in the United Kingdom and the United States, to confirm this, with both having a similar story. According to the source, George R.R. Martin was forced by Warner Bros. To give HBO's writers D.B. Weiss and David Benioff the ending to the show as early as Season 4. It said they needed the ending early, that way they were able to foreshadow and work on the ending for the TV show iteration. Now apparently the Game of Thrones writers David and Dan were not satisfied with his ending, which led to a falling out with the author. This also lines up with when George R.R. Martin stopped writing episodes for the show. Remember, he said he left Game of Thrones after season 4 because he wanted to finish writing Winds of Winter, the same novel that still isn't here. The article goes on to say, as much as fans blame David and Dan for moving from the source material for the last few seasons for the ending, it may have been the same ending George R.R. Martin had in his mind for his own novels all along. As far as the Winds of Winter goes, it's said to have been turned in completely to George's editors before the final season of Game of Thrones was ever filmed. After the reaction from Game of Thrones writers David and Dan, George is said to have gotten cold feet and pulled back the manuscript right before it was getting typeset. The rest, as we know, is history. The fans' reaction to Season 7 and Season 8 of A Game of Thrones was dismal. While David and Dan got most of the blame, it's said that they followed George R.R. Martin's original ending, and when he saw how the fans reacted, he wanted to rewrite it as something else in hopes that his A Song of Ice and Fire series would end on a note that his fans actually enjoyed. Unfortunately, the level of negative fan reaction to what he already wrote scared him, which caused him to stop writing almost entirely, and this is the reason for his lack of work on the saga. It's said that the fans' negative reaction has basically paralyzed his writing. And while I'm not able to verify the information, it would certainly explain a lot of the events that have unfolded over the years, including the author's remarks about Hollywood last year when he said, "Everywhere you look, there's more screenwriters eager to take great stories and make them their own." I'm not sure if I actually believe this is what happened. I honestly don't think George would give a shit about what David and Dan thought of his ending. I do, however, think he would care about the fans' reaction. We saw that firsthand last week when he shared his thoughts about what the fans have said. We know that he does care about what we say. The only thing is, does he care enough to go back and rewrite his entire novel, essentially delaying it for a decade? That I don't know. I can only speculate and base it off everything he's said for a fact. This certainly isn't the first time I've heard that he may have finished it before Game of Thrones ended. In fact, there's a lot of fans who still believe Winds of Winter is already done, only George is waiting to release it at the same time as A Dream of Spring. I've never believed that was the case. I've always felt that he would release it immediately after he finished all of the writing. I just don't believe he would sit on a finished novel when his millions of fans have been demanding it for over a decade. Now, I'm sure he did go back and rewrite some things after he saw how Game of Thrones ended. I mean, how could you not after seeing that reaction? I highly doubt he wants his greatest work to suffer the same fate as the show. And he sort of already revealed this years after Game of Thrones aired its final episode when he said, his writing is getting further and further away from the show, likely a reaction to what David and Dan had done. I'm just worried that even if we do see Winds of Winter, we may never actually get to read his full ending of A Song of Ice and Fire. Unfortunately, there isn't really anything we can do about it but sit here and wait for its release. I would love to see what all of you have to say about these updates. Leave me some of your thoughts down below. As always, I have to thank all of you for watching another video. I hope everyone has a great day. I'll see you again very soon. Bye.